So hi everybody, this is our session today. I'm going to post this on La Lima, um, and I'm here joined by one of your classmates, Kelly, and also by a colleague of mine. I'll just briefly give a brief bio for you, Dave, but maybe you can give us a little bit of a fuller one in a minute. This is Dave Reardon. He teaches for us. He actually teaches magazine writing for us. But perhaps more importantly for this conversation is that he's a very well known and admired and liked and respected local sports columnist. He's kind of a big public figure in the local media scene because he writes a sports column and it's very well received. And Dave, how long have you been doing that for?
As a columnist, like being my main job, about 20 years, and 20 years before that as a beat reporter in sports mostly. I did work regular news wire service, also magazine editing, and um, I was a food writer for a while too, and that was, of course, a lot of fun and pretty interesting. Now I have to, and thank you for that very kind introduction. But if you're a columnist and you're a critical columnist, which even in our market in Honolulu, which is a little soft sometimes, you're not always beloved by everybody because you if you do your job correctly, you're probably gonna maybe suggest that some people get fired or replaced in their job. So but I thank you for that introduction.
So
And
Dave, if you're saying if you do your job as a columnist, then you're not going to be so beloved by
not
everybody.
by everyone. Yeah.
Yeah. And Dave, maybe this is a good time to explain to people. I'm sure a lot of students don't really know what a columnist is, or say how that's different from what they're learning to do. Do you want to explain that to them briefly?
Yeah, and it's actually, I think it's changed a little bit because um it's there used to be, it used to be easier to describe the distinction because you could say most times when you think of a columnist, it's like what I was talking about, somebody who writes opinions, but they're not always opinions. It's something, what I think distinguishes a column in most cases is it's written by one person each time, and there's a lot more latitude for opinion, commentary, reflection. A lot of times personal, like you might pull up something from your own life, and it's one of the few things in journalism where you're allowed to use the word I sometimes, and I try not to do that too often, but sometimes it is, and it often in a newspaper anyway will appear on regular days. There are some people who are part-time columnists who might write a column once a week, and let's say if your beat is covering a Major League Baseball team, so you write your game stories, you do your features, stories about injuries, etc. And you might have a weekly notes column, which a lot of times is leftovers. But as you know, sometimes leftovers can be pretty tasty. So stuff that wouldn't, it might be a good little nugget of news and information, but it didn't fit into the game story or whatever you wrote that week, where it got cut out for whatever reason, but maybe you need to do a little more research and get more information on it, and you have maybe 5 or 6 of these items that would make a notes column. So there are many different types of columns, and a columnist, it used to be the really cool job at the newspaper, especially in sports, that a lot of us aspired to. And there was the golden age of column writing, being a columnist, but that's changed a lot because of the internet and blogging, and how basically anybody can go out there, and if they are entertaining, informative, and develop a following, they might skip the other steps and get to being that type of a figure where people will want to, if someone's a UH football fan and that's what you're writing about, and they like what you write, they're going to be looking forward to each time that you post a new blog item, or you could call it a column. And You know, a blog is sort of like a column, except it's online, and it's generally a little shorter. So it's kind of some gray area in what a columnist is nowadays. But in print, newspapers and magazines, which was applicable to you folks, if it's a monthly magazine, that a person's column would normally be in every issue. And there are occasionally columns that are written by more than one person. You don't see that too often, but there are some popular ones out there that are written by two people. And sometimes one person is doing more of the fact gathering or whatever, and the other person is doing more of the actual writing, or it's a team for some reason. In Honolulu, we have a couple of dietitians who are affiliated with UH, Alan Tichenal and Joni Dobbs. And for a long time, they wrote a popular column about nutrition in that appeared in the Honolulu Star Advertiser. That's what we would call a niche column. And a sports column would also be a niche column too, but a little broader because it represents the entire section of the newspaper. Anyway,
So,
I know we have other things to talk about. So,
well, one thing is I want to introduce Kelly. So, Kelly, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself? You're on mute.
My name's Kelly. I just transferred from KCC to UH Manoa. Trying to pursue the major in nursing, and well, for the graduation requirement, we do need some writing intensive course. So I choose this course because I was very interested in magazine writing, because we know about like how to read magazine, but how to make a magazine writing was very interesting for me. Even so far, I'm enjoying this class a lot.
Great. So you just I guess before we get what we're going to talk about today, first and foremost, is how to write a query email to editors, so that and what is a query? A query is an email that you would send. You would send it cold, so in other words, to an editor that you don't even know or have never spoken to try and sell a story, a specific story, to that magazine that editor works for. Okay. Since that's kind of week 4 where we're at right now with the kind of progression of things, Dave and I are going to start to talk about that, but we're also going to address some of the things that are several of the things that you guys have said that you're struggling with, or that you have questions about, or things that you've commented in on the discussion forum that I've picked up on. But we'll deal with the query letter first. Before we say that, though, you dropped a couple of things in there about being a columnist that I think are worth kind of wrapping up just before we get into the query thing. So, Dave, real quick, I guess one thing that's important is, just to underscore what Dave's saying is, when you look at the Star Advertiser, the daily newspaper, the front section of that is the news, right? And then there's an opinion section in a newspaper. So when Dave says he's a columnist, he's in a newspaper, he's writing a regular opinion section, and that would either run in the opinion section or in the sports page as a separate opinion column. So people are very clear when they pick up the paper, oh, this is the opinion thing as opposed to a news. Having said that, Dave kind of suggested there, one of his columns one day, like, he wouldn't be as good a columnist if he hadn't learned first how to write hard news, and second of all, how to write features. Because you can correct me if I'm wrong here, Dave, but you might basically just write one column that's just basically a feature. Maybe you tweak it or loosen it up a little bit because it's your column. But basically everything that you've learned to do in writing a feature, you and even like the Wall Street Journal, the very straightforward kind of feature that I'm trying to get you guys to do, he may just write it essentially that way. The other thing is, we've talked a lot about the difference between writing an essay, right, and telling a story. Okay, so a story is this happened and then this happened. You tell a story, right? Something happened and you tell it, right? By writing a column, he's kind of doing a lot of essay writing. He's saying general things, he's giving an opinion or whatever. So a column very much mixes up kind of essay writing and storytelling. But he wouldn't be as good a columnist if he hadn't been a reporter for so many years who practiced storytelling as much as he did, because he can easily turn his hand to telling us a story in the column, or he can mix the two. In other words, he can start by telling us a story and then sort of shift into essay mode and start giving us an opinion. The third point I wanted to make about it, and I'm let's see if Dave has something to follow up with about it, is a lot of students come into a journalism class with this idea that's been kind of banged into their head over and over and over, because it's a cliche that we hear about news. Like, there are certain cliches that you don't need to take a journalism class, you hear, like who, what, when, where, why, and a lot of students try to apply that, sometimes inappropriately, when we're trying to teach them to learn certain steps of the writing process. Who, what, when, where apply doesn't apply all the time to every situation. It's something journalists understand, and it works into what they do, right? Another one is, you've got to be neutral, you got to be impartial, you can't be biased, you got to be unbiased, and no bias at all, no opinion at all, just the facts, right? And obviously, if newspapers have columnists and have columns, there's got to be a reason for that, right? And Dave, I wonder if just because this is something that a lot of students have a hard time letting go of, the idea that somebody is writing for a newspaper or a magazine and has a bias, right? And you're a columnist, so it's all about bias. That's why you're there, because you have biases in a way.
My job,
You don't have an open mind.
My job as a columnist is to generally to find what the thing that people are most interested in that day in the sports world, and have a take on it. Or but when I say take, I mean like maybe not necessarily an opinion, but at least some insight about it or some thoughts about it to help continue the conversation. Or it could be, sometimes we do break news in columns, because that's sometimes the best way to do it. And so we do work with who, what, when, where, why, but more why and how than who, what, when. I mean, we do sometimes in columns we do have a nut graph, but a lot of times we don't. Or it might just be because the nut graph might in effect be a story that's right next to the column in the paper or on the same page on the website. Or like Caitlin Clark, if any of you follow basketball, women's basketball especially, you know who Caitlin Clark is. And even if you don't, you might know, because she's become so famous in the past few months. And she's the fact that she didn't make the US Olympic team is a big topic of discussion, because anything having to do with Caitlin Clark, Shohei Ohtani, but not just sports though. And there's, I was talking with Julian about how people want to read about people. I read a really good column earlier today in the Washington Post about Jill Biden and Hunter Biden. And Hunter Biden's in the news because he got in trouble and he's maybe going to prison and all this. And it was talking about whether Jill Biden should be described as his mother or not, because technically she's not his biological mom. But it's a really good piece though, and it talks about how his mother died in a car crash when he was about 2 years old. So, but she did all the things that a mother would do, and they don't describe her as stepmother. And so, but it was a really well-written piece about motherhood, and not the kind of thing I normally would read, but I was interested in Hunter Biden and that situation. So I ended up reading something I normally wouldn't. But it was a topic of the day, and somebody who had a really good, interesting take on it.
Yeah, I mean, and I think two things to underscore before we move into queries, which is that when people say just the facts, there are a lot of facts in the news that are coming out all the time. We are overwhelmed with facts. And so what a newspaper and a magazine or any news outlet has to do is choose facts and put them together to create a picture. Okay. And that process of gathering facts, organizing facts, and creating a picture is, you know, we're getting all pieces of truth all the time when we get a paper. And the role of a columnist is one way, and a very important way, that in news, journalists and newsmakers try to help us understand the facts. By having columnists, we say, here's one way to understand the facts. Here's what I think about the facts. What do you think about the facts? Right? So discussing these opinions is absolutely essential to the news. So when people say, well, I don't want any opinions, I just want the facts, it's like, well, which facts and how are you going to look at them? And that, you know, so one media scholar said, you know, there's two important things going on in the news. There's facts and there's forum. Facts is, you know, when you do a news story or you do even a feature, right? It gives you a bunch of facts and it gives you a read on this happened, or here's what happened and here's why it happened, and it has all that. Forum is where we debate and we discuss and we try to figure out what really happened and what it meant. And so you wouldn't have news if you just had fact, just as like you wouldn't really have news if you just had forum. Newspapers and magazines have to have fact and forum. The second point I wanted to make about this is that so Dave right now is a newspaper columnist. He's worked for magazines, but his job is with the Honolulu Star-Advertiser as a newspaper column. Magazines, as we've sort of been seeing with all the things we've been reading and discussing, the line is much more blurry about what's a news story, or you know, what's news and what's factual and what's opinion. A lot of times magazines will run features that, you know, Dave mentioned using the first person. You know, there will be feature stories that are written in the first person sometimes, right? Not as much as you'd think. Most writers and most editors stick to third person for a reason. But the line is blurrier with a magazine between just the facts, news, and opinion. And part of that is because we're doing all this feature stuff in magazines, and the filler, which you guys have written, and the columns that we've been talking about, and it gets more in depth, and you know, so there's just like looser lines in a magazine. Would you kind of agree with that, Dave?
Certainly, and the example I like to use that most of my students can relate to pretty well is, let's say your assignment is to interview Taylor Swift at her home. That might be where you bust out first person, because your reader, your audience might want to know, what did it feel like? What was it like? You know, and sometimes your readers might live vicariously through you. And you see this a lot more in magazine writing than you would in a newspaper or other forums. I mean, you see it on broadcast a lot too, right? Like, and it's a different kind of journalism, but it is journalism. And some of it harkens back to what Professor Gorbach has mentioned too, about the Tom Wolfe and like Hunter S. Thompson. So the personal journalism that we see now, which is partly because of the technology, it's not really new in every way, because we went through this in the 60s, right? And the 70s, where there was a lot of this different kind of participatory journalism going on, where Hunter S. Thompson wrote a book which people consider journalism, I think, about hanging out with the Hells Angels, who, if you're not familiar with them, were a pretty vicious motorcycle gang. And I don't know if it's worth getting beaten up for a good piece of journalism, but it was fairly well received anyway.
Spoiler alert there with the what happens to Hunter S. Thompson. So, and maybe like the simplest way to put that, you guys, is the easiest way to see that, the way that the magazines treat opinion and treat columns, is that, often there are columns in a magazine. Like there are individual, like Dave would have his name and a little picture, and his column would appear in every issue. But there isn't necessarily a clear news section and opinion section in a magazine. What I noticed in going through a lot of magazines to prepare you guys for the filler assignment, and I went through a ton of different magazines, is pretty much all of them will have like features in the table of contents, and then departments where they'll have, like, maybe if it's a bicycle magazine, a section on gear or whatever else. But that isn't necessarily delineated between fact and opinion, or news and opinion. It's, a feature story could be, like Dave says, written in the first person, so the lines get blurrier, right? So, okay, we just dealt with a pretty complex issue, but let's get right into how to write a query now. So maybe the first thing to explain is what a query is. And maybe I should explain this, Dave, briefly, so that you don't have to, because you were asking me, what do you mean exactly? And that's one of the funny things about learning journalism is, it's not like all of us get handed a dictionary with a bunch of terms, like different unfortunately, I've often wished there was just like a glossary, and we all stuck to what the same words mean. Like, you've heard Dave talk about a nut graph. He may mean something different or broader when he uses the word nut graph. I'm really specific because I'm really, really trying to get you guys to practice and learn how to write this Wall Street Journal formula, one specific formula for writing, right?
I always ask my journalism students, if Professor Gorbach or Professor Appegard, if they're telling you something different than what I am, please let me know, because it doesn't necessarily mean we're both right or we're both wrong, or one is wrong or one is right. Because what Professor Gorbach just said, these things can be very vague. Now, there are very few things in journalism that are just 100% always right and 100% always wrong. But one of them is toward. It's always toward, never with an S. It's a very small, minor thing, but you can actually apply this to when you're doing your query writing, which Julian's going to talk to you more about. But people ask sometimes, what's the purpose of AP style? And I had to think about it to some time. Let me get back to you give you a good answer. And one of the parts of my good answer was, when you're writing a query, or especially some experienced journalists who you don't know and you want them to hire you to do something, if you don't write your query in AP style, or the style that publication uses, your chance of getting that job is decreased very much, or a lot. Would you agree with me,
Dave? Because we haven't covered AP style yet, because there've been so many, I've just been trying to get them out in the field and write. But what he means by AP style is there's a specific way, like, let's say you mention a date in your story, or a time in your story, or the job title of one of the people you're writing about. There are specific rules for how you write that. Okay, if you write an address, there's a specific correct way to write an address. If you name a state, it depends on the context in which you mention the state. You may abbreviate the state, or you may spell it out. All these rules are set out in the AP style book, okay? And so that set of rules is called AP style. So what he's saying is, when you write a query, if you don't follow those rules, or you don't follow the set of rules that specific magazine established, because sometimes they don't just use pure AP style, they create their own kind of mini rule book, right? Which you can, figure out by reading the magazine pretty quickly. If you don't follow that, that's a tip off right away to an editor you're writing for, that you kind of don't know what you're doing, right?
I'm sorry, I got a little bit ahead there. I forgot that not everybody in this class took 250 or
That's right. So let's explain what a query is. Okay, so if you guys remember, I asked you to pitch to write a pitch, right? That was an assignment you guys had for your filler assignment, okay? And a pitch is just kind of the raw pitch. It's like coming up with an angle. And we're going to get into how you, because I know a lot of you guys are wrestling right now with developing a focus. You've never had to develop a focus for a story, and I'm not giving you one right off the bat, like a really clear one. I'm saying you have to develop one, right? Which you have to do usually when you go out to cover something. But that's, a pitch is, here's what my specific focus or angle is, okay? A query letter is related to the pitch, but it's what a query is specifically is the email you would send to an editor in order to sell your story. So a query letter would contain a pitch, okay, but it would also include maybe after you've pitched your story. So let's say you have a paragraph long pitch. You want to keep your pitch very short and tight and interesting, right? Because you're trying to sell the editor and saying, yeah, okay, we'll pay you to go to go write this and we'll publish it, right? So your query letter is going to have a short, tight pitch, but it's also going to have, for example, a bit of biographical information so that the editor knows, like, oh, okay, this guy who wrote to me, I may not know him, but he's an experienced writer and he's done many stories in the past, and here who's he's written for. In other words, your query letter would include a short bio, which would explain your credentials and let the editor know why you're able to do it. It would also probably include links to what we call clips, which are stories that you've published already, okay? So one of the things I'm trying to get you guys to do in this class is to give me a polished enough feature story that we can publish it in the student newspaper, the Manoa Mirror. And that way, if you do write a query letter to an editor to pitch a story, right, you can include links to the stories you've already published. So in other words, you will have clips, okay, published stories, and you can include links to those in your query letter to an editor. So Kelly, you're the only student who's here. Is that clear enough to you, that what a pitch is and what a query is?
I would say if just by reading from Laulima, it actually, what I have been facing is I keep searching like related information online because I was trying to understand that. But by attending this room section, it makes me so clear to understand what a query is and what else, what requirements is needed to create a query.
Right. So so I guess Dave, do you want to I gave them an instructions on how to write a query, but Dave, maybe do you want to go in, or do you want me to give a brief?
Yeah, I can throw my 2 cents here. Like most things that you're going to do in journalism, before you send a query, you want to do a little research. You want to read this magazine, several issues of it, and you want to first of all, you want to make sure you're sending your query to the correct person. Last year, when I taught magazine writing, one of my students was going to send a query letter to an editor who had already left that job, and they hadn't updated their website. So I coincidentally, I knew about that situation. So I said, whoa, you're going to have to, it might be good to place a phone call, or so if it's a smaller magazine that maybe they don't keep up their website. But, the big ones like, a national magazine like Time or Newsweek, or so those you can usually depend on. And a lot of them will actually have something on their website that tells you exactly what they want in a query and who to send it to.
Let me just interject it right there and say, sometimes your best chance of selling a story is to actually pitch it to like an assistant editor or associate editor, not like the top editor. Because what's happening in the newsroom at that magazine is these assistant or associates are trying to move up. And the way that they score achievements and get promoted is they find good stories. So the guy sitting at the top may be getting swamped by queries, whereas an associate editor or an assistant editor may be getting much fewer queries in the first place, and may be eager to find a good story to then bring up to the editor and say, hey, what do you think? Should we run this? And if it turns out really well, it's good for that editor. So it's often
That's a
advantageous.
great point. And I can attest to that personally. And it actually worked this way as part of my job, because I was an assistant editor, and then I got promoted to associate editor, and people asked about it, the promotion. I told them, oh, I'm just a bigger ASS than I was before. But anyway, so but part of my job was the editor, my boss. He didn't even look, he might screen them a little bit by look. If something was really crazy, he would just toss it. But he would always send them to me to look at. And then he would tell me to, hey, look at these and screen them for me. And he'd give me a general idea of what he was looking for. But it was part of my job as an assistant and associate editor to actually help be a big part in choosing those. And if somebody contacted me directly, yeah, that would be something too. That would be a feather in my cap if my boss liked the idea. And then, especially if how sometimes it's like, if you're the person who comes up with the idea, you're the one who's going to end up being the one who does the work. So you would be, because in magazine writing, more than newspaper and other types of journalism, there's other than book writing, I think, the relationship between the editor and the writer is really important. And the story is going to go back and forth depending on, how often the magazine comes out. If it's a monthly, it might go back and forth a couple times for revisions. I worked at a quarterly, so we did a lot of back and forth, and it wasn't always pretty. Sometimes there was, and there's a lot of give and take in that writer-editor relationship. But Julian is 100% correct, that you want to you might even want to place that call to, if you're not sure, who should I send this query to? And you might even get to talk to somebody on the phone, which is also a good way to pitch too.
Another thing to bring up at this stage, while we're just kind of explaining what it is to point out why we're not talking about writing a full story and then just sending in your manuscript. Okay. So, first of all, it's very unlikely that if you write your whole story and just send it in and say, hey, publish this, that they'll even really look at it, because they know that that's not how this works. People approach them with queries. They don't approach them with finished manuscripts. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But, I guess the most important way to think about it is to say, what you're doing when you're sending a query is saying, hey, I have an idea that I think you might be interested in for a story. So let me try and interest you in it at this point and invite you in the process of, please, editor, please tell me what you want me to do for your magazine to turn this into a successful story. If you hand them a finished manuscript, you've cut them out of that whole process, which is absolutely essential for them as editors. So what you need to do is just give them even if you've written a draft of the article, you don't even want to tell them that. You just want to approach them with the idea and say, what do you think of this idea? How can I work with you to turn this into a story? That's why you give them a query and not a manuscript. Right,
Yeah.
right, Dave?
Yeah, what they used to call spec, right? And then yeah, it's like it's a little bit like a poker game. You don't want to put all your cards on the table right away. You might write something really great in Professor Gorbach's class this semester, and it goes on in no mirror. But then if it's something that's applicable, the topic, the subject matter for a different magazine, now you would have to change it substantively. In the old days, before the internet, we would sell the same story to as many different outlets as we could.
Don't tell them that. Don't tell them that.
No, you don't do that now.
And nowadays, that could ruin your reputation.
Right, because that's called self-plagiarism. You can't do that nowadays. Yeah.
Well, and it's not just self-plagiarism. If you publish the same story If you sell the same story to one magazine and publish it in another,
Mhm.
you've put that magazine in trouble. They paid for something that's appearing somewhere
Right.
else. Maybe you got two paychecks for the same story. That's unethical. And when they find that out, which they would even before the internet, then that would really harm your reputation. You burn your bridges with that publication.
But you know,
But
it was,
also,
it's funny though. That's interesting because it was an accepted practice in the editors. So for some, and I guess not. You know, it depends what on the editors themselves. But we were always pretty transparent about it. Like we'd say, yeah, a version of this story has appeared elsewhere, but because their readers didn't have access to it, it's not like I was doing this for two competing national magazines. Those are smaller
right.
newspapers in different markets. Okay.
Right.
Should
It's
have been
good to
more
be
fair.
transparent about that. And it's also, you want to sell them something different. You wouldn't sell the exact same piece.
Right.
And until you've heard from one publication, don't pitch the exact same story to another. That's, considered unethical. It was then and it is now.
The other thing you have to be careful about too, is speaking of ethics and things of that nature, is you don't if you you want to do enough research where you know a little bit about the person you are sending your query to, because if they have a bad reputation of with writers, they might just, sometimes there's nothing stopping them from stealing your idea, saying, oh, we don't, this is okay, and then you might see the story written by somebody else in their publication. But that has happened. I'm fortunate. I don't think it's happened to me. If it did, I didn't
I mean,
notice
I've
it.
been ripped off by like the New York
Have been,
Times and the National Public Radio. Well, a lot of times what they'll do is I would write it for my newspaper as a staffer, and then they would take my story and they would run it in the New York Times with one of their staffers. But it was the
Yeah.
exact same story I covered.
I've had that done to me by Sports Illustrated and AP.
Yeah, that's pretty common. So they don't get it at the pitch, but I think I've had that done at the pitch level too. But anyway, so we were talking about research your market before you send the email. We got as far as figure out who the editor or assistant editor is and make sure you have the right email address and address it to that person, right? And the more you know, obviously, about who that person is, the more chances that you'd have to give them a successful pitch if you can figure out what kinds of things they like. But a lot of times you don't know that. You just have a name on the magazine, what we call on the masthead, of who that person is and their email address, right? So so one thing is identify the editor. Dave, you want to talk about what other preliminary research when you look at that magazine and you look at back issues of that magazine to know who you're pitching, what are the other things that they need to look for before they even approach the outlet?
Well, this might be obvious, but just make sure that your story idea fits for the magazine. Like, let's say your story idea is ballroom dancing. You probably don't want to try to sell it to a bowling magazine. Unless but although it could be a very interesting story if somebody's a championship bowler and a championship ballroom dancer, they might be interested in that because it's Professor Gorbach talks about news drivers. That would be one because the oddity of it, right? And what type of person would be a great bowler and also a great ballroom dancer?
And then the other things you want to figure out who their audience is, right? So who are they writing for? And you can kind of tell that by reading not just one issue of the magazine, but a bunch of issues of the magazine. And one of the ones that I shared with you guys was the skater magazine, Thrasher. So if you look at a bunch of issues of Thrasher, you get a clear idea of what these skateboarders are like, what kind of readers they are, what their attitude is, what they like to read just from reading the magazine. There could be, like, especially maybe with surfing, you could have one surf magazine that writes for a specific kind of surfer and another surf magazine that writes for a very different kind of surfer. I mean, theoretically, and so you want to look at who their audience is. you want to look at, and this is related to it, the style in which they write. So some magazines are very straightforward, almost formal in their style. Some might be very sarcastic, or humorous. And so, it's really important for you to understand not just who the readers are, but the tone or the style in which these stories are written, so that when you write your query, you signal that. The third thing is just obviously, I guess it's what you began with, Dave. The content. Is this even appropriate? Am I pitching the ballroom dancing story to the ballroom dancing magazine, and not, or to the right section of the right magazine? Like, and one of the things you want to do, particularly with you guys, when you're just starting out and you're not going to have a lot of clips, those are the articles that you've published, maybe you only have one article so far that you've published. You want to signal to these editors right away that you've done this research and you know what they're about, and that's why you're sending them an email. Okay. And you have to look at that from their perspective. First of all, it signals professionalism to them and that you know what you're doing. But second of all, they don't know you, they know their magazine. They're interested in themselves and their magazine. And so you're trying to kind of be considerate, or, since you're trying to sell them something and get them on board with you want to reach out to them in a way that shows that you're thinking about them. So you say, I know you guys love to do this, or I know you guys love to do that, or you guys constantly do this, and I love your magazine, I love what you do, I want to kind of participate in what you guys are doing with you. So you want to give them some specific signal. Maybe it's before you even get into your pitch, just when you say, dear whoever, I've been looking at your magazine, I saw this great thing, and I had an idea for you, here it is, right? Or maybe you go right into the pitch, dear whoever, pitch begins with word one, sentence one of your story, because you've got a great thing that's going to pull them right in. And then you follow that up immediately by saying, I thought you'd love this idea because you've been doing blah, 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 blah. And then that kind of reinforces, it follows up with, it's like a combination punch. You give them a good pitch, and then you follow it up with saying, and by the way, I've done my research, so I know that, this is something that's really going to appeal to you, right? And then I guess, did I cover this? So yeah, I did. So your query is going to include a pitch, some signal that you know who they are and what, where you think it fits in the magazine and why, a bio and clips, right? And then often it's a good idea to follow up, right? So in terms of the meat and potatoes, Dave, is there anything you would add to that? Anything I missed?
I'll give you I just want to give you a specific example, especially because our market, all markets are unique, but our market in Hawaii is unique as we have the culture here is so varied, right? And so one of the things that is kind of a area of some debate that applies to writing and what different publications do is there's no real clear consensus on publications in Hawaii on whether we're going to use the Hawaiian diacritics, the Okina and Kahako. I always pronounce it wrong, even though I'm Hawaiian. Kahako, okay? And now this is something where it'd be real indicator of your attention to detail and whether you have read that magazine or not, and you notice if they use them or not, and in your query you use it the way they do. And like Julian said earlier, almost every magazine will vary from AP style. Some will have their very own. When I was at the HMSA Island Sea magazine, we used well, the dictionary, all right, and then there's AP, and then after that we had our magazine style guide, which included some medical terminology and some Hawaii stuff. And then another thing we use, believe it or not, is this book called Pigeon to the Max, because has to do with that Hawaii culture thing, where sometimes there may be situations where we use a Hawaiian slang Creole pigeon term. Also the Hawaiian dictionary. So, and I think all these things are online now. I'm not sure if Pigeon to the Max is or not, but it's, and also I don't know, Julian, maybe what kind of questions would you have people who are doing a query ask other than the obvious, like, are you interested in this story? And would you be talking about pay yet, or do you wait until later on that?
I would not, especially for these guys. What you guys need right now, I wouldn't worry about pay right now. One of the things about freelancing I find, and why, I've shared with you guys some of the freelance I did, but why the reason I didn't do more of it is because it's very difficult often to get a magazine to pay you on time. They can take a while, and so if you're trying to include it in any kind of a budget, it that's something to I think about later on in your career. Like if you've been a staff writer for a while and then you start regularly freelancing for someone else and you start establishing a relationship, you can get deeper into the negotiating process with them. Or, it is something that's worth bringing up earlier on if you are really pitching to one of the more, let's just say there's more of a direct commercial purpose for it. Like if you're going to pitch to an airline magazine, like a flight magazine, right? Then I would not worry about it at this stage, you guys, because you need clips more than you need the money that they give you for the thing. But once you've kind of established yourself, if you're pitching to something like Network Computing Magazine, you're going to want to know what they're going to pay you pretty early on, because you're not writing for Network Computer Magazine just for the fun or the prestige. You're writing for it for the money, even if it is a freelance thing. But I would not start, if you don't know them, I would not start negotiating right away. If they haven't been clear, transparent about what they pay for this stuff on, like, say, their website, you might want to say at the end of it, also, I'd like to know what you generally pay for a magazine. But again, that's like, if you're writing for Travel and Leisure, you just want to publish in Travel and Leisure or in Cosmo or some magazine that's like a really big name. Right now, that's what you're worried about. At a different stage of your career, it's different. But if you're writing for like United Airlines magazine or something, you might want to say at the end of the thing, by the way, what do you usually pay for these stories? Just make sure you don't undercut your own sale, I guess, with it. At this stage, any publication, even if it is an airline magazine, it doesn't matter. Any clips that you get are worth their weight in gold. In other words, it's more important for you to get published than to get paid right now. And like I said, these magazines don't pay in that timely a way. I want to say regarding the diacritics, so I believe we've already like with Brett Opegard's class, already created a full diacritics guide for the island. Is that right, Dave? You may.
And he's got an interesting project he's working on now with using AI to check for the proper usage. And sometimes it's debatable though, and you have to do additional research. And I have some go-to people who are Hawaiian language scholars who I talk to, because an example is Lahaina. We just posted a story about restaurants in Lahaina in the Mirror, and there's some debate as to whether you have kahakos or not over the A's of the first syllable of Lahaina or not. And my research, just a few minutes of quick research on the web, we found a couple of very respected Hawaiian language scholars say that it's correct to not use them because the way people said the word, or 90% of Hawaiian language speakers say it, the way they pronounce it would not have those marks. So, there's always, like I said before, there's always different interpretations of things,
So again, but the online, do you know if we have the online guide available, which I think we do, we just created it this spring, so it's kind of exciting. Then I will put a link to it with the video when I put this up on La Lima. Okay. So Dave, you got right into a really important and interesting aspect of this, which is really a large reason why I wanted to have this talk with you, which is what is unique or specific about pitching to local outlets, and maybe we should talk a bit about what some of those local outlets are. Like you mentioned at least one that I don't think I was aware of, that sounds like it would be great to pitch to. And two, what are some of the other concerns or things to think about other than just diacritics about pitching locally?
Okay. Well, I think one thing that you can use in your queries, and I don't think this is only true in Hawaii. I think it's true in most places, is that if you're serious about journalism or writing and want to be a professional writer, you're gonna network and you're gonna take classes like this one where you meet other writers and you meet professors and you meet editors, and if maybe you might be a member of the Society of Professional Journalists, and you may meet some of these editors or people who do work for these magazines, and you have to be careful how you do it, because you might maybe you were at a speech that this editor gave at some SBJ meeting or something, and you could write in the query, you could mention what your takeaway was from that speech. And like I said, editors they're gonna know what you're doing, but they'll still appreciate it as long as you don't overdo it, I think. I mean, and locally, and we have this dilemma, especially if you're from Hawaii and you're raised the way a lot of kids in Hawaii are raised. They tell us don't be niele, but which means don't be nosy and don't and be humble and something. But you have to be assertive to be a journalist, and you have to be a little nosy, and in order to, it's a competitive market too, so you got to use your contacts. Okay. And part of what you're doing in college is developing contacts, and this is also, like I mentioned earlier, not just us but your fellow students too. And you through this class, you'll all have different experiences of pitching different magazines, and I know it might be a little difficult because you're not in class together, but that doesn't mean you can't ask each other about or share what your successes and your not so great successful experiences were, and help each other.
So we were struggling a bit with, I was saying I should do a Zoom with one of the better known feature writers locally. And we were struggling with like who that might be right now. I have to do a little bit more looking around to see like who won the SBJ award for feature writing last fall, summer, when those are given out. I think they're given out pretty much every time this month, right? In June usually.
I remember you asking me about that, and there's a guy named Chad Pata, Pata.
Uh-huh.
He writes a lot of really good profiles for midweek, and his day job or night job, I forget how it works, he's a bartender, and then he's a freelance writer. And so a lot of you'd be surprised sometimes how some of the better writers that's not their main job. But they like it and they're good at it, and it's their side hustle. So
yeah, what do you think makes a local freelancer, when you've known them or whatever, what makes them successful? What is it they do locally in freelancing that works particularly well for this area, for Hawaii?
that's a good question. Okay, a connection with the outdoors, right? Because in Hawaii we are very, a lot of it has to do with our weather, right? So I think stories that have to do with outdoor activities, and here's where that thing about maybe not being totally objective, being biased might come into play with me, because most of my background is as a sports writer, but you know, so there is that, but I'll counter that. I'll check myself by saying food is another thing that people in Hawaii, especially because we have so many different cultures here intermingling, right? And so there's all different kinds of food, and that might be uh, when I was a food writer at the Star Advertiser, we used a lot of local freelancers, and I think we still do. I'd have to check that though. And magazines, a lot of the local magazines also will have food stories and recipes. So if you are interested in cooking, or you're interested, I mean, everyone's interested in food, right? So but I think in Hawaii especially, we are a very food conscious community and market here.
I think somebody also that, to follow up on a couple points you just made, somebody with an inside perspective on like the Chinese community, the Thai community, the Filipino community, any of the different Hispanic communities that we have here, that can give you a real edge. Maybe for a food feature, maybe for something about, hey, this group gets together at and they're all Filipino, get together at the park and play, and that could be a feature. So those connections. I mean,
Another one is the Pacific Islanders, other than Hawaii. I have a kind of a pet peeve when we talk about Pacific Island, and I said, well, last I checked, Hawaii is a group of islands in the Pacific, but I was told that terminology came about because of the census, so it's not meant to be. But when we say Pacific Islander, we generally mean islands other than the Hawaiian Islands, and this would be a community that is very in some ways looked down upon because they're the newest wave of immigrants in Hawaii, which is a lot of Micronesian folks. And so if you are Pacific Islander, or you have a special interest for whatever reason in that culture, that's an underrepresented group of people in the media. There is a very good reporter, I think she's still working at Civil Beat. Her name is Anita Hofschneider, and she is I'm not sure which Pacific Island. She's not from Hawaii, but she's a Pacific Islander, and she does really good work. But it's a very underrepresented group in media and kind of stigmatized, I think, sort of like how Samoans were generations ago. And it's not right and it's not fair, but it's kind of the way things go in if you look at American history and history of Hawaii, the newest wave of people kind of get looked down upon, and our job as journalists sometimes is to, a lot of times is to fight for the little guy or the ones who are getting the raw deal. So if you can do that type of thing, that's you capture the spirit of what we were talking about earlier, circling back to the facts and forum. We have the two things, one being the facts would be, like they often say, journalism is the first draft of history, right? And in the forum part, a big part of that is what we call speaking truth to power. And in magazine writing, you can do some of that depending on, what type of magazine and story you're talking about.
Yeah, I do want to say, Dave, it's 2:53. Do you have to go in like 7 minutes?
Yeah, I've got to go work a rim shift. I'm helping out. Sometimes you got to wear more than one hat too. So because so I'm helping out on doing some editing in the sports department tonight.
So maybe what we gonna, if you're willing, you sort of said, I didn't think that the time would go so fast. These guys are struggling a lot with like how to focus a story, how to develop a pitch, and maybe we can do a follow-up video on that, and the relationship between, narrating, like telling a story, and explaining things or offering opinions, and how important it is to learn how to be a storyteller when you become a journalist. But I did want to say, with the few minutes we have left, we have like 6 minutes left. Just to tie a bow around this, like pitching locally issue, I had wanted to ask, like, well, is anything really different or new, like now with all the social media being such an important part of our media ecosystem. But maybe before we get to that, even more important is, can you suggest some magazines that are local, or that anybody here in Hawaii might really want to think about pitching to, that maybe they either haven't heard of or hadn't thought about, or are just really important ones to think about when you think about pitching?
You know, some of them come and go pretty quickly, but mainstays, Honolulu Magazine, okay. Now it might be a little high end in some ways, but they also you know, if you have a good story, you have a good story, and they might be interested in it. So Honolulu Magazine, all right. Now there's Midweek, okay.
Can you tell us a little about Midweek for those?
Okay, Midweek is it's sort of a hybrid newspaper or magazine, because it comes out once a week, but it's more like a magazine than a newspaper, I think. And it is, but it is like tabloid style, and it's not glossy paper. It's just, you know, it's a throwaway. Okay, but they do want stories, and you go to their website and check it out. And they, one of the things they do is they're really good with profile stories. That's why I mentioned this guy Chad Pata, who I think is a really top-notch feature writer, who also happens to be a bartender. You know, bartending, I did a little bit, and that's a good way to get stories, believe it or not. Because, I mean, yeah, I mean, because people come there and they talk to you, and if you listen, you're gonna hear some interesting stuff. But you know, and you, I I think you know, you mentioned the airline magazines, though, and that's good. Yeah, the Hawaiian Air magazine, they run some good stories, and I would and you know, because of travel, you know, if you, that's something where you would have to do your research too, because you would want to know all the different places that Hawaiian Airlines goes to. And that might be like, let's say you're going on a trip to, I'll just use it because it's a common, Las Vegas, and Hawaiian Air flies to Las Vegas. Maybe there's something there that you notice that you think would make a good story. Maybe there's a new Hawaiian food place there. There's probably 5 new ones since the last time they did a story. But that's the other thing too, when you do your research for your queries, is make sure you're not offering up the same exact story that they already ran, you know, previously.
Isn't there a local company that does a suite of travel magazines? And also, you mentioned that you worked for a travel
I'm
magazine.
trying to think of the name of this. Well, a guy named Dwayne Carisu is the publisher owner of several magazines, and I don't think it's published anymore, but it used to have one that I really liked called Mana, and Mana was specifically about about Hawaiian culture. And but he's always got several things out there, and I'm trying to, I wish I could remember the name. When I remember the name of the or find the website, I'll send it to
I
you.
I know of this company. At least they were around in like 2017, 2018, and I don't know that I've circled back, but they were doing very high end and a bunch of different titles, right?
Mhm.
What's the one that you worked for, that when you were saying you were involved in?
Island Scene magazine, and it's HMSA's quarterly. And they used to pay really good freelance because they took into consideration that it was a quarterly. And generally, if something comes out less often, the pay is better. Because if it's a nice magazine, not a throwaway like Midweek that I was talking about, nice glossy magazine with a attractive cover, what they call a coffee table. You remember Seinfeld when Kramer had the idea of making a coffee table, a book, about coffee tables, right? A coffee table book about coffee tables, but that's what they call it. It's these kind of magazines that are nice, have a nice cover, and So they paid pretty well. Now they do more of their stuff in-house than they used to, but if anyone feels, if you do your research and you feel like you have a good story for them, you can contact me either through Professor Gorbach or find me online, and I'll get you in touch with the editor there. Okay.
So I will, I've done this last time I taught the class. I'll do it here. I guess we'll put it in week 4 as a list of local publications that they might want to think of that they hadn't, like Island Scene Magazine, or the name of this magazine company that I don't know offhand.
Well, I wonder how, and I don't know the answer to this. Maybe you do, but I wonder how the military bases. I'm sure they have publications, and I wonder how they are. If if they might have a budget for freelance stuff locally. I don't know.
I mean, another thing that I looked into a lot, and I actually had the editor come in the last time I taught the class, was this whole suite of magazines that publishes right out of where you are now with the Star Advertiser.
Yeah.
So there's all of these. There's a magazine for every neighborhood.
There's one called Hilux, which is like Honolulu Magazine, but even more, exclusive and elite. Yeah. So, unless you're independently wealthy and you want to, or maybe you have some expertise in like high-end cars or something like that, then maybe you could make a pitch for that, or a lot about ski vacations or something.
Yeah, I thought it would be a great opportunity, having the editor come in and talk or whatever. I've gotten the impression they're using a lot of staff stuff, maybe, Star Advertiser stuff, and they don't seem as
Yeah.
open to freelancing. Is that like the
we used to hire a lot of freelancers at the Star Advertiser to cover things for us, but we don't anymore. But we still do have internships, and so the one we got this year is somebody from a different college, but I'm always happy when I can recommend somebody and they get it. Like we had somebody, Reese Nagaoka, a couple of years ago, who was our intern from UH, and usually and we have one in the during the legislature also. We have a legislative intern. And the one we had last year, she got another internship. She got kind of a big time one. I'm trying to remember where it's, but Tori DeJarnette?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was her. So.
Yeah, I mean, I like I said, I did have the editor of this suite of magazines for, like, there's a magazine for Kakawako, there's a magazine for Kailua, there's a magazine for the McCully neighborhood, there's a magazine, for each of these neighborhoods, there's actually a magazine. The problem is, I don't know if they're letting us as outsiders pitch to her, but I will include maybe her name and email address, because she was nice enough to come into class and talk about their editorial process. But as far as Dave, they're not. Is it that they're not accepting outside freelancing at all? Or?
They might. I mean, if you're talking about, if you're not worried about getting paid, they might be willing to work something out where it's some type of internship thing or something. But I remember my first byline outside of my high school newspaper was at something called the Pearl City Community Association newsletter. And I covered a meeting, and it was a really boring meeting, and it was a pretty boring story. And I didn't get paid anything from it, but it was something I got to put on my application for college and stuff that I'd been published, and it might have helped. I don't know, so like
so before we wrap earlier, up, though, we should mention, some of the other major ones are Hawaii Magazine, right? Which is, every state has one major magazine. So like there's, like, if you live in, I don't know, New Mexico, there's a magazine called New Mexico Magazine. You can pretty much count on that, right? So there's Hawaii Magazine, there's Hawaii Business Magazine.
Yes, of course.
I did talk to the editor there overnight, Steve Petronik.
Yes.
Taught this class, and it's interesting, you guys, just to let you kind of understand where we're at and where the business is at. I said, Steve, do you want to come on and talk to the students about how to pitch stories? And to be honest, he said, look, these students are not yet ready. If I get on and because he's taught this class, and he said, if I get on and I explain to them and I invite queries, I'm going to get swamped with queries. And there's going to be all these problems because the students aren't experienced yet enough to know how to come up with a successful pitch. And, I don't want to either just blow them off or, not really help them. And so I don't want to invite all that work for myself, frankly. So he was kind of saying, please get them a bit more ready and prepared before they pitch to Hawaii Magazine, which I think from his perspective, he wants to do right by you guys, is understandable because he does want to, they do hire interns from UH all the time, but he doesn't want to start taking a bunch of cold pitches because he really is committed to getting back to people in a detailed and meaningful way. And if you send him stuff where there's all kinds of problems with your query, he's going to feel obligated to do it. So that's something to keep in mind. But there's from your perspective, you got to start somewhere. So just I wouldn't be discouraged from sending a pitch to anyone at this stage, because and then that's maybe the most important rule you have to learn about becoming successful as a reporter is when you're starting out, when you get knocked down, get yourself back up, stand back up, and so, but there's Hawaii Magazine, Hawaii Business Magazine. What
Would
are
you
some of the
consider
other
Pacific
civil
Business News? Pacific Business News is a weekly, and it's mostly just news stories. I don't know if I'd call it a magazine in any sense of the word, but it is a publication though that you could make queries to.
Hawaii Public Radio they run material on their site. The TV news channels run content. These are not magazines, but they are local outlets where you could pitch stories and potentially get published and get clips. So, this is why I'm not leaving the hard news or the basic news stuff out of magazine writing, because, from the perspective of journalists, they're all connected.
If you do your query locally, it'll get your name out locally. So regardless of whether you think you're going to get it or not, make sure you write a good one, because they might not have something for you now, but you write a good query, they might remember you later when it comes time to judge awards or give out internships and stuff, things of that nature.
So, okay, we're actually a few minutes past 3. Anyway, I'm sure you guys don't want to be sitting online for listening to or watching a video that goes on for more than an hour anyway. But Dave and I are going to try to follow up with another video soon where we get into, like I said, this issue of, how do you develop an angle? How do you develop a focus? And also this relationship between, writing generally with rhetoric that's explanatory or opinion oriented or summary is kind of blab in a way, blah, 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 versus telling a story. Here's this guy, here he is digging a hole right now. It's Sunday morning and we're right there with them, and something drops from overhead and we're right in the scene, and it's really important that you guys, you're not as practiced at doing that. And I really want you guys to not only practice it, but to demonstrate some skill at it before this is over, because you can't be a magazine writer if you can't tell a story. So Dave and I will talk about that. In fact, one of the things we talked about doing, which I'll see if Dave is game for, is I tell him a story, he tells me a story, then we put that video up as a separate video and we say, okay, this is Dave and I telling stories. Either you can practice trying to write an alternative anecdotal lead based on what we said, for that you would follow up with a nut graph about some article about something, or you could try this at home. Sometimes they say, don't try this at home. We're saying, try this at home. We're saying, turn to a friend and you tell a story and have them tell a story, and then write that down and share your story or their story or both stories with us, because the more practice you get at storytelling and not explaining, the better you're going to get at this, and the better your hooks are going to be, which are not only those opening paragraphs when you write a feature story like that Wall Street Journal style that I'm teaching you, but is going to be essential for you to write these queries. Because basically, you probably want to write either kind of, I mean, you kind of want to write a nut graph. I mean, you basically, like, for your query, you might want your query to be like your alternative lead in your nut graph right there, because you want to hook people, you want to hook the editor in, right? So that's where the storytelling comes in, and not the explaining or philosophizing or whatever. And then you want to say, boom, this is what my proposed story is about, and this is why your readers will care, and this is why it fits for your publication in particular. So so Dave and I will get into that anyway. I think I should speak for him because I know he's very busy, but if we can impose upon him for another hour or something, we'll do another video about that.
I don't mind at all. And I think we might have some fun with it too.
Yeah, great. And I appreciate it, Dave. Kelly, did you have any questions?
No, I was very enjoying to see like how you guys like interact in between, and I really like what makes me more clear is about like really like storytelling this part, because by you guys interaction I found like more ideas about my either my first picture story or the upcoming one. So give me the idea that what is real working in this like industry.
I want to mention to you at the beginning when you're talking about travel agent, your family is a travel agent business. To me, I'm very interested in that, because to me that's one of the industries like journalism that has had to change a lot and adjust a lot. Because my first question might be, why do I need a travel agent when I can book my own stuff online?
Yeah.
And so that would be a story I'd like to read, is like, how I bet your folks have been doing this for a while, right? This
I've
business,
been
right?
like almost 40 or 50 years.
Yeah, so they've had to make a lot of adjustments, right?
So
So
Kelly, why don't we stay online? I'm going to end the recording in a minute and let Dave go, and you and I can start.
okay,
But one of the
see you
things
later.
we can talk about, yeah, thank you, Dave. I really appreciate it. Okay, let me pause the recording.